We have this breaking news just into CNBC. Speaker Boehner's office says the president called the speaker this evening to tell him he would not negotiate with him on the debt limit. Boehner's office says it's obviously disappointed by the decision. All right, let's get right to our distinguished guests. There are two guys who strongly support the defunding strategy. House members Phil Rowe of Tennessee. He's the chair of the Republican Study Committee's Health Care Working Group, if I'm not mistaken. He's also a doctor. And Brad Wenstrup from Ohio. Brad, I don't know if you're a doctor or not. I didn't get that far in my research. You are?
Yes, I am.
All right, good. We got two doctors, and maybe you give me some help. Let me just ask you, this is an odd story. Let me start with Dr. Rowe. The president calls Boehner and says, I'm not going to negotiate with you. It's not like, hi, did you have a good trip? Are you okay? Do you want to play some golf? Do you want to have a cup of coffee? No. He calls him and says, I'm not going to negotiate with you. What's up with that?
Well, that's ridiculous. Presidents have negotiated with Congress for years, and there's a long history of that, and certainly with the debt ceiling, because the debt ceiling vote is one that we have to pass to run the full faith and credit of the government. So ultimately, I think President Obama will negotiate. And let me just say, Dr. Wenstrup over there is currently serving in the military. I'm an ex-military Army veteran. And served overseas, and neither one of us got elected to shut the government down. We got elected to run the country. That's what I got elected to do. That's what the people in Tennessee sent me to do. So it's a president that's talking about shutdown. Just remember, today we just sent a bill to the Senate to look at and evaluate, Larry.
All right, I get that, but Brad Wenstrup, let me go to you. Obama said also on the stump today that you all are just messing with me. That's what he said. You're messing with me. And then he said, we'll become a banana republic if we don't get the debt ceiling through and if ObamaCare is defunded. So you're messing with me and a banana republic. Now, that's pretty rough language. What is your reaction to that?
Well, I think that my constituents feel like that the president is messing with them. We see businesses shutting down. We see businesses letting people go, cutting people's hours back. You know, as Dr. Rose said, we don't want to shut down the government. We don't want to shut down the country either. So ObamaCare is not only bad on the health care front, limiting access and making it more difficult and increasing costs, but is also bad for business. And people are going to have a better opportunity to get good health care if they're actually working and working full time. And this bill takes that away. We're listening to the American people. You know, in 2011 in Ohio, 66% of Ohioans voted for Issue 3, which removed the individual mandate and made it illegal. Now, the Supreme Court trumped it, but I know what the people in Ohio are saying to me about this, and the president needs to listen to his constituents as we're listening to them.
Phil Rowe, let me challenge, as somebody who does not like Obamacare. I've opposed Obamacare from day one, but I want to challenge you, all right? You probably saw the Karl Rove editorial in the Journal, Wall Street Journal. If you defund and shut down the government, people are going to be furious at the GOP. And I want to ask you what you think about that risk. And secondly, I want to ask you, wouldn't it have been more popular politically, even among Democrats, to have simply said, let's delay for 1 year the individual mandate, delay all parts of the individual mandate, just like delaying the business mandate? Why not have done that and broaden your base? Why go this more controversial nature, which has no way of winning in the Senate, as you well know?
Well, Larry, we've got a couple things. You make some good points, but remember, this is just the first salvo. We're going to start a negotiation here. And I don't disagree that maybe the ultimate end of this negotiation is a delay in the individual mandate and a delay of the entire bill. And to Dr. Wenstrup's points, Larry, let me give you some of the real-world effects. We have a major medical center in Tennessee that's laying off 1,000 people. We've had a hospital close near me in Southwest Virginia, and there are others on the brink of closing. The Cleveland Clinic, one of the most famous healthcare clinics in the world, is laying off thousands of people. This is having an effect on real people, and the Republican Study Committee assigned me to write an alternative to the Affordable Care Act, which a committee that we put together did and introduced this week. It puts patients and doctors in charge of health care and gets the bureaucrats, the insurance companies out of it, and gets the people back in charge. It's market-driven. And I think is a much better plan than this incredibly complex 2,700-page bill. And just to finish up, it's a 182-page bill.
All right, so that's a lot simpler than the current bill. That's what you're saying. But Brad Wenstrup, let me go back to you on this.
Sure.
Once again, I don't understand that it's not the broad strategy, it's the tactic. You're going to lose in the Senate, and you risk a shutdown because this thing could drag on. Are you telling me, was Dr. Rowe telling me, that if it comes back from the Senate, you or Mr. Boehner in the House will resubmit different iterations, like, for example, a one-year delay on the individual mandate? Now, you know, that might make political sense to have fallback positions. You're going to get closer and closer to the September 30th shutdown deadline. Is that what's going to happen here?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen exactly. We have to see what the Senate does. It's now time for the Senate to act on this. We need to know where they are. For the last 4 or 5 years, we've hardly ever gotten to know where the Senate is on just about anything. So this is an opportunity for them to let us know where they stand on this and let the American people know where they stand on it.
We know, I mean, Harry Reid has said with great clarity that this defunding is not going to work and he's going to get rid of it. And he's holding the cards. The president has said he's going to veto it. Now he's making fun of it. If you keep throwing things back, I mean, I understand that. I think you should have started with the individual mandate. But I'm just saying, you throw it back, okay, you're playing ping pong, in effect, from one house to the other, and meanwhile, the shutdown date gets closer and closer. I don't understand the politics of that. I think you're losing supporters on that. That's my concern.
Well, I think that we're clearly showing that we want to keep the government open, and that is what we're doing. And that's why we're going to be back there next week and not being back in our district next week, because that's the art of negotiation, right? It does have to go back and forth. And you mentioned in your preview about the president how he'll suddenly negotiate with Putin and he'll negotiate with the Syrians. Well, you know, he's shown that he will come to the table when he has to and start negotiating. And when the American people speak loud enough, which I think they are starting to do in this, as they're starting to understand this law, I think the president may come and starts talking to us, and he should. He owes that to the American people.
Well, he does, but he sounds like he made a very rude call to Boehner. I mean, we'll learn more about this breaking news. It just happened, and it just came out of Boehner's office. But I think that's extraordinary for the president to call the Speaker of the House and say, hey, how are you? I'm not going to negotiate. But, Dr. Rowe, I'm going to give you the last word. I want to ask you something else that bothers me about this. With all the political risks you're taking on defunding Obamacare, which holds up the bill, which gets you closer and closer to a shutdown, which gets the Republican Party more on the hook. You know, I think you know, the way the budget rules work, you can't defund under a continuing resolution. The CR is about appropriations, Dr. Rowe.
It is.
Most of Obamacare, 80% of Obamacare, is an entitlement. And entitlements are not affected by the continuing resolution. So you're throwing yourself into the lion's den, and the potential yield, the rewards you're going to get, is tiny.
I disagree. They're not tiny. I think the fact that the Affordable Care Act is one of the biggest mistakes this country has made legislatively in decades. And you're already seeing the effects of it, Larry, and it's time that we went to the mat on this. And by the way, we did vote in the House to delay the individual mandate. It went nowhere in the Senate. So we're not getting a hearing, as Dr. Wenstrup said, in the Senate. And quite frankly, I think this is a strategy to take. We'll wait and see what the Senate brings back, and we're going to be in town next week to continue this negotiation and not shut the government down. Look, we've both been soldiers in the field. We want to pay our people out there, and that's our intent.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. Look, I'm just challenging. I'm just challenging stuff. I'm an old Reagan OMB guy. I know how this works. I may not be a political genius, but I think the Republican Party is really taking a large risk on this one. Anyway, gentlemen, thank you. Congressman Phil Rowe and Brad Wenstrup. We appreciate it.